You have now gone on to build an institute and work with the world's leading brands and teach everybody things from reading faster to better memory to being present. It is incredible because when I hear your story and I then think about how much you've accomplished and how many lives you've changed, I go, well, if Jim with his broken ass brain can do it, I can certainly improve my brain. Yeah. If he can understand how to leverage the capacity of his brain to help him achieve his goals, then I bet I can.
I truly believe that an individual's ability to adapt, to learn, to unlearn, to relearn is one of the most important things that people could invest in. Because if there was a genie could grant you any one wish, but only one wish, everyone would wish for limitless wishes, right? If there was a learning genie that could help you become an expert in any one subject or any one skill, what would the equivalent be of asking for limitless wishes? Would it be learning coding? Would it be learning to be able to speak another language? It'd be learning how to learn. Because if you can learn how to learn, focus, think, read, retain, apply, you could apply that towards everything: medicine, marketing, money, motivation, martial arts, and anything gets easier, right? Because it's a lead domino. It's the one thing you hit, and everything gets, you sharpen that saw, which is your mind. So I really think that this is this technology. We always hear everyone got the new iPhone and upgraded their apps and get the new devices, but when's the last time we took time to upgrade?
So, Jim, I want to just take a second and talk to the person listening. And as you're listening to Jim, I want you to now make this really personal. Let's put what Jim's telling us to the test, okay? And I'm going to go first because here's what I'm thinking on behalf of both you and me. Jim, how the heck can I and the person listening upgrade the brain? Can you give us simple tricks? Because here's the thing, I'm already overwhelmed. And between the ADHD, the menopause, the 3 kids, all the stuff that I'm forgetting all the time, I mean, how am I going to also add upgrading my brain to the list? And look, I don't have a story that I have a broken brain. And for you listening, I don't know what your story is, but I can see that I have a belief about my brain that is limiting. And I believe that I'm always just going to be forgetful. I believe that I have a hard time remembering names. I believe that it is impossible for me to learn a foreign language because I'm dyslexic. I believe that I'm overwhelmed and I'm just going to be overwhelmed, that my thoughts are going to spin. And now that I'm saying all this, Jim, I realize that I have a lot of limiting beliefs. And as you're listening, I do want you to stop and think about, what is your limiting belief? Do you think you're not smart? Are you like me and you're like, I can't learn a language, or I'm not good with math? Or here's another limiting belief of mine. I have menopause, and everything that I'm learning is that your brain fog is something that comes with menopause. So am I still going to be able to upgrade my brain with menopause and all this stuff that I'm telling myself? Seriously? Like an iPhone, Jim?
So the good news is I would say yes.
Well, that's encouraging.
So we have students in our online academy in the same 194 countries. We get a lot of feedback and we have a lot of data.
Okay.
I've had the honor of sharing stage with you many times. If there's time, I'll do these demonstrations where they'll pass around a microphone in an audience and introduce themselves, and I'll memorize like 50 or 100 people's names, right? Or they'll challenge me to remember 100 numbers or words, and I'll do it forwards and backwards. But I always tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you as possible. Because the truth is, we could all do that. We just weren't taught, right? It's a skill. If you go to somebody like your kids and you say, focus, memorize this, study, that's the equivalent of going to somebody saying, play the ukulele, who's never taken a class on how to play the ukulele before. But we didn't have a class called Focus, right?
Oh, I just had a huge breakthrough. Oh my God, I think I got it. The ukulele example is exactly, that just cracked the code for me, Jim.
Yeah.
All of the education that we have had has been for the purpose of absorbing something to spit it back out and then moving on to the next thing that you're going to absorb and spit back out. And what you're basically saying is that you became an expert at figuring out the skill of learning and of memory retention. That's probably my daughter calling me. You know what? This is a good sign, Jim. It's always a
Yeah, that's
great
a sign.
episode when one of my kids FaceTimes me in the middle of it. So, but I just got it. Like, that's what you're teaching us.
Like we were taught how to read, but when's the last time we took a class called reading? We were like 6 or 7. So we, even if we learned a skill, we haven't updated that skill. I feel like, and the difficulty and demand of our reading has increased exponentially, but how we read is the same. So that growing gap creates a lot of stress, information anxiety. So skill acquisition is important. I do believe that genius is not so much born, genius really is more built.
I'm so glad you're still here because you're getting a private session with one of the world's leading brain coaches. And I want you to get ready because in Jim's book, Limitless, he gives a ton of tips on reading faster, many of which I'd never heard before. So, Jim, what are they?
Here are a couple of tips that could really help listeners not only read faster, but improve their focus and their retention and understanding of the information. Because if you ever read a page in a book and just forgot what you just read, and you had to reread it, and then you still forgot what you just read, this could really help. So the first thing is we all have books on our shelf we haven't read yet, right? And the goal is when you pick up the book, if you use a visual pacer when you read, you'll read it faster. And now, what's a visual pacer? It could be your finger, it could be a pen, it could be a highlighter, it could be a mouse on a computer. And what you're doing is you're not touching the page or the screen, you're just going right above it and just underlining what you're reading. Now, I want you to not just believe everything I'm saying, you could test it out also. When we're done with this episode, pick up a book that you're reading, put a mark in the margin where you're left off. And what I want you to do is set your phone, your timer to go off in 60 seconds. So we're going to read for 60 seconds. And I want you to read how you would normally read, not using your finger, but just how you would normally read for comprehension. And then at the end of 60 seconds, I want you to put a mark in the margin where you left off. And then count the number of lines that you just read. And that's the lines per minute. Now, set the timer again for another 60 seconds, and then pick up where you left off, but this time just underline the words. And you're just underlining the words as you would read. And then at the end of 60 seconds, put a mark in the margin, and then count the number of lines you just read. For the majority of the listeners, they'll find that second number will be 25 to almost 50% greater. And you don't have to work any harder. So it's not about working harder, it's about working more intelligently, right? And so the reason why it works is number one of the challenges we have when we read is we backskip.
Backskip? What is backskip? What does that even mean, Jim?
We reread words.
Oh.
And this keeps you from doing that. Some people reread whole lines, right? On the other side of it, your eyes are attracted to motion. So if something ran across your room, you wouldn't look at me, you would look at what moves. Because as a hunter-gatherer, your eyes are trained to look at movement. Because if you're in a bush and you're hunting lunch, let's say it's a rabbit or a carrot, depending on your diet, if the bush next to you moves, you have to look. Because number one, it could be lunch, or number two, you could be lunch. So when your finger is going across the page, it draws your attention through as opposed to your attention being outside of you. And then the final reason, use your finger while you read, it's kind of interesting. Kids use their finger while they read naturally, organically, until we tell them not to. And you do also, because when I ask people to count the number of lines, maybe they didn't use their finger when they initially read, but if I ask you to count the number of lines, what do? Use your finger as a visual aid to help you to focus. But the final reason is your certain senses work very closely together. For example, have you ever had a great tasting fruit right from the farmer's market, but you're not actually tasting a peach, you're smelling the peach, but your sense of smell and taste are so closely linked, your mind can't tell the difference. It can tell the difference when you're sick, when you can't breathe out of your nose. What does food taste like? It tastes more bland, right? And so just as your sense of smell and taste are closely linked, so is your sense of sight and your sense of touch. That when you use your finger while you read, people will say they literally feel more in touch with their reading.
Seriously? This one tool Just using a visual cue or pacer or whatever you called it can increase your reading speed by 50%. Is that really true?
Absolutely. 25, 50%. Some of the listeners doing this exercise will actually double their reading speed. And think about it, the value of that. The average person spends about 4 hours a day processing information. You think about social media and emails and books and reports and research, whatever you have to go through, the newspaper. If you could just cut that in half, you double your reading speed. So you save 2 hours a day. What's 2 hours a day over the course of a year? In fact, what's just 1 hour a day saved over the course of a year? 365 hours. How many 40-hour work weeks is that? Over 9? Over 9 weeks of productivity you gain back, you reclaim. 2 months of productivity is back of yours, saving into something ubiquitous like reading.
You know what I really love about this, Jim, is that you don't have to try harder. What you just taught us is a skill that will help us read 50% faster just by using the tip of a pen and leveraging the super wiring of how our eyes are wired to track to movement. That's incredible. So let's jump into the next skill, which is, what is your technique for always remembering people's names?
Yeah, so a name is very important. I always say, remember mom. This is just, I mean, there are a couple dozen examples in the book and techniques, but remember a name, as they say, is the sweetest sound to a person's ears. It's probably the number one networking business etiquette skill, because how are you going to show somebody you care for their future, their health, their family, whatever you have to offer if you don't care enough to just remember them, right? Maya Angelou say, people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And that's so important to remember names. MOM, of course, it's an acronym because I'm doing this short form and podcast form. The first M is motivation, meaning having that purpose. A lot of people won't remember names because they haven't touched the reason. So if you ask yourself, simple thing you could do before you meet somebody, ask yourself, why do I want to remember this person's name? Just get in the habit of doing that. Maybe it's just show the person some respect. Maybe it's to make a connection. Maybe it's make a new friend or get a referral, make a sale. If you don't have a reason, you won't get the result. If you come up with a reason. So for example, if there was a suitcase, like most people say, I'm horrible at remember names, but I challenge people on their BS, right? Their belief systems. If there was a suitcase, if Mel and I had a suitcase of $1 million cash, tax-free, if you just remember the name of the next stranger you meet, who's going to remember that name? Everybody, right? Everybody will. So as a coach, I'm going to call people on their BS, right? Their belief systems. It had nothing to do with your capabilities. You can remember names. Are you motivated to remember that name, right? And one of the ways to do it is to ask a question and tune into why.
Okay, so to remember names, you have to remember mom, and the M stands for motivation. Got that. Why are you motivated to remember their name? That makes sense. What does the O stand for?
The O in mom, this is big, is observation. A lot of people aren't forgetting the name, they're just not paying attention. The art of memory is the art of attention. Like I remember years ago, I got to go to this fundraiser, and it was 2,000 people. We're sitting at the table. I'm the first one there, and after that, then another person, Forrest Whitaker, the Oscar winner, sits right next to me, and then Richard Branson sits right next to him, and then Ashton Kutcher and Ashton Kutcher's twin brother, who I didn't know he had a twin brother, sits there, and then President Clinton sits right next to me. Now, I had met him a few years before, very briefly, and when he saw him at the table, he called me by name. He said hello by name. And I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, because I'm sure he meets a lot of people. And then I was like, oh, okay, he knew who he was sitting with, right? Obviously. And then I swear he picks up on the conversation that we had 3 years before, and nobody was privy to that. And I was like, I'm a memory guy, right? I need to know how you're doing this. And he tells me the story of his grandfather in Arkansas in the living room, and he would tell stories, but afterwards to kids, he would quiz each of the kids to see if they were paying attention. Now, when he's explaining this to me, I also noticed at a meta level, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm the only one in this room, because the way he's communicating with me, it's like there are a lot more important people in that room, especially at that table. And yet I feel like he's not looking over my shoulder or seeing who else is important. And I realized, politics aside, people would say he's a great communicator, a great connector, a great charisma, and he's got an incredible memory and his powerful presence. And I think, Mel, his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. That his incredible memory and his powerful presence with people comes from being powerfully present with people, right? Because most people, they're not forgetting the name. They're just not even hearing the name. Why? Because they're looking around or they're thinking about how to respond. They're waiting for their turn to speak. And so an easy way to remember names, listen. And even if you want to do a brain exercise, think about the word listen and scramble the letters, and it spells another word perfectly. It spells the word silent. And so just be there and listen.
I love that, because being truly present when you're with someone will help you make them feel like they're the only one in the room. And you just taught us that incredible memory comes from being powerfully present. And so when you're sitting there and you're present and you're silent and you're taking in what the heck they're saying, you're also going to remember what they're saying. That's so cool. So what is the last M in mom?
The last M are the methods, right? And here's the quick method: suave. When you're next time you're at an event and you want to say, I'm going to remember names. I'm more conscious of it because I listened to that episode.
Right.
Look at yourself and say, I'm going to be suave. The S, say the name right away. When somebody gives you their name, greet them back using their name, because it means you get to hear it twice. And also, it means you don't want to have a 20-minute conversation with somebody. Like, say there's a lot of background noise, 20-minute conversation with Ted and say goodbye, Ed, right? You want to be corrected up front.
I like the fact that you say the name immediately, because even if you say it wrong, they'll correct you and they're not going to be
Yes.
offended, because if you say it immediately, it's just that you heard it wrong. It's not that you
Yes.
didn't remember it. And also, if you notice, well, so keep going. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you say the name, then you use it 3 or 4 times in the conversation. And then the A in suave, ask. This works really well for people who have unusual names or names you haven't heard of before. What can you ask about a person's name?
how do you say your name?
How do you say your name? How do you spell your name? Where is it from? Who were you named after? Does it mean something in another language, right? So everyone's favorite topic is their name. Actually, when you're talking about the reticular activating system, which is gears your focus by asking questions, because our brain is mostly deleting information, the name is up on top, because think about it, it's probably one of the first words you heard, probably one of the first words you learned how to write, and then think about all the encouragement, the emotional, like, wow, congrats, like, so it's one of the reasons why it's the sweetest sound. But ask about a person's name, they'll be flattered, especially unusual names.
Okay, I just want to make sure that as you're listening to Jim, you picked up on the fact that he has this acronym SWAV. And SWAV is what we're using as the tool to help us remember someone's name. You said it kind of fast, Jim, so I'm just kind of slowing it down for those of us who may not be as quick in the super brain as you are. The S is for say it. Got that? Makes sense. Say it as soon as they say their name. U is for use it, which also makes sense, because the more you use it in a sentence without being creepy, the more you're likely to remember it. A, ask about it. What does the V in SWAV stand for?
The V in suave is visualize. And this is how I do it in front of audiences. If there's time on stage, I'll have 30, 40, 50 people stand up, pass around a microphone, and I'll memorize, upwards of 100 names, depending on how much time we have. But how I do it is I would just visualize the person's name, meaning most people listening are better with faces than they are with names.
Yes.
Right? You go to someone and say, I remember your face, but I'm sorry, I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say, I remember the opposite. I remember your name, but I forgot your face, right? That doesn't happen.
True.
But your visual cortex takes up more real estate. And so we tend to remember what we see. And if we tend to remember what we see, try seeing what we want to remember. You meet someone for the first time and their name is Mary. Imagine for a split second that she's carrying 2 lambs underneath her arms. Mary had a little lamb, right? You meet someone named David, just hit him in the nose with a slingshot. It's David and Goliath, right? And people say, that's so childish, but that helps you to remember it. Because if you could see it, feel it, and hear it, you're not going to forget it.
Got it.
Right? So
Okay.
you're hearing it, you're visualizing it, and you're making it kind of funny or ludicrous, and then you're not going to forget it. So a person's name is Mike. Imagine they jump on a table and sing on a microphone. And when you say goodbye to them, you're going to remember, oh, that was the guy that did that. What's his name? Mike, right? So a person's name is John. You could, picture whatever you picture, right?
You
And then
got that.
and then finally, the E in suave stands for end. End the conversation saying goodbye using their name. Because if you could walk into a room of strangers and leave saying, let's say 20 people, and leave saying goodbye to every single one of them, who are they all going to remember? You, right? And that's an absolute standout skill.
Jim, I hate to say this. We got to take one last break. And the reason why I hate to say it is I don't know about you listening, but I'm starting to feel like my brain feeling a little bit more super. Aren't you feeling a little bit more super in your brain? Like I've got some mad skills that I didn't know about. And guess what? Jim Quick, he's not done because he's got this super crazy cool trick. So you will never forget where you put your wallet or your keys or anything for that matter. And that's not all. Jim is also going to cover the 10 things that you need to eat, think, and do in order to have a super brain. And he's going to reveal, finally, that secret to how the heck he can remember 200 names forward and backwards. And he's going to do it for you in real time coming next. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's your friend Mel. I am thrilled that you are here because we're about to dive into the 10 things that you need to eat, think, and do in order to have a super brain. But first, I almost forgot the thing I really want to learn, which is how do I remember where I put my keys?
Yeah. So it's always the key to, I can't believe I said the key. There are 3 keys to remembering your keys, right? For all memory is you encode, you store, and you retrieve, right? The hard part is the retrieval because if you didn't encode it well or store it somewhere, it's going to be hard to get it back out and recall it. So encoding you do by seeing it and feeling it. The more senses you use, the more likely you're to remember it. Taking a split second, and it only takes a split second to make something ordinary and turn it extraordinary. That's what makes it memorable, right?
Definitely.
And we only went through it once. Right? So you don't have to repeat it over. You don't have to say, my car keys are here 15 times. But what all I would do is you need the locus of attention. You need to fine tune your concentration. So let's say you put your keys somewhere, you have to be mindful of it or you're not going to remember it.
That's
right?
true.
So it takes a little bit of effort. The good news doesn't take much. It takes a split second. So if you took your keys and then just threw it on the desk, just for a split second, imagine the desk explodes. Right?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
it's like, boom. Like that's like you can't forget that is to make it extraordinary for the things you want to remember. Like the periodic table is pretty ordinary, right? But if I taught people how to visualize that and add emotion and turn it into a story, we teach kids like 8-year-old to memorize the whole periodic table in like minutes. It's insane when you could see it, feel it, and hear it. Even languages. If I did something with counting to 10 in Japanese for everybody here, and you don't have to do this on video, but let's say people want to learn that language. Like, do this, Mel. Just scratch your knee and say itchy knee.
Itchy knee.
That's 1 and 2. Itchy
knee.
is 1,
Itchy
knee is 2.
knee.
San is sun, like sun. So point to the light up above. San.
Sun.
San. So it's not sun, but san. And then
San.
she. So point to a female in the room.
She.
She, right? So ichi ni san shi. That's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Itchy
Right?
knee, san, she. Holy
Yeah. And then
cow.
5 is go. So if you just pretend and say go,
Go.
I'm on video, I'm moving my hands and my feet. Go. That's 5. And then 6 is roku. So imagine you're rowing a canoe.
Oh, Roku. Like like a
Roku.
canoe. Yeah, Roku.
Yeah, roku.
Roku.
And then you have that's
That's pretty
that's
cool,
6
dude.
right
Like
there.
you're
And so you could
literally
even
like
literally go
making
to
my
10.
brain better. Like as we're talking.
Yeah, so there's so many things. My point with this whole thing is so many of us shrink what's possible to fit our minds when we could expand our minds to fit all that's possible. So regardless of who's listening to this, their age and their background, age or stage of life, everybody can improve. It's just you just need the correct lessons and a coach. And our brains. I want people, Mel, to know their brains. Right? Know more about their brains. I want them to trust their brains. I want them to love their brains, and I want people to use their brains because it's the greatest gift that we have. And great things begin on the inside. And people who are listening right now, they've self-selected. They have greatness inside of them, and they have genius inside of them. And now is the perfect time to let it out.
Wow. Well, I feel like I should go Roku, she, sun, Niche, like that. I just
Yeah,
counted
yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1 backwards. So, and you
But it,
just taught me how.
like learning doesn't have to be this like sit quietly by yourselves and just study and repeat things. Like who wants to do that?
Not
Who
me.
has the time to do it or the inclination to do
Well,
that or the
guess what,
interest?
Jim? Now that we have you as our brain coach, we don't have to. because you have
Yeah.
all the methods to help us be limitless in our lives, in our thinking, and in the way that we learn. And so I asked our online audience and our
Hmm.
listeners of this podcast, what are you struggling with? 95% of people said distraction, memory loss,
Yeah.
information overload, the anxiety about all the things I need to do, my inability to remember things. And
Yeah.
so, what do we need to do? Can you walk us through
Yeah.
simple things that we need to do that you teach people in your institute to tap into the capacity of our brains?
Yeah. So for me, it's three things,
Okay,
framework, and then we could go into the tactics and tools.
let's do it.
It's three M's.
Okay,
It's your mindset. I define mindset as a set of assumptions or attitudes you have about something.
okay,
Your attitudes, assumptions about money, your attitudes, assumptions about relationships, maybe about yourself, even, right?
okay.
So the mindset for me at events where I do these demonstrations, people are like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I have a horrible memory. I'm not smart enough. And I always say, stop, because all behavior is belief driven.
You say stop when somebody says I have a horrible memory, because when somebody says I have a horrible memory, that is a mindset. And that
Correct.
mindset, I have a horrible memory, or I'm not smart, or I've never been able to learn a language, or I'm a slow reader, all of those statements is the mindset that is limiting the capacity of your brain. So, step one is to identify what your mindset is when it comes to your brain.
So the first one is your mindset. If people say they feel like they're not smart enough or they're too old, I say stop, because if you fight for those limitations, you get to keep them. Meaning
Okay.
your brain is like this incredible supercomputer and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you won't remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to.
That makes sense.
Your mind is always eavesdropping on your self talk. Audit yourself. I don't have great memory yet. It just opens up the possibility and it just feels different.
I like to just stop and put a highlighter on what Jim is telling you. And I have a story that I'm dyslexic and I took 6 years of French in high school. And I went to college and took an exam to place into, the French requirement. Dude, I placed into French 101 for people who have never taken it. So, and yet, I have this calling and this desire to
Yeah.
be able to speak conversational Spanish. Jim's point here is that if I'm not willing to stop telling myself that foreign languages are hard for me, I will never, ever, ever utilize the methods effectively because I will always be arguing against them. And so that's step one. And
Yeah.
then let's move on to the second one.
Motivation. When we talk about motivation, I ask myself this question like 10 times a day, verbatim. What is the tiniest action I could take right now that will give me progress towards this goal where I can't fail?
That's a big
What?
question. Now, see, here's
Thank
part
you.
of my problem, Jim. I can't remember the question.
Okay, here we go.
That's
We can write this down. What is the tiniest action I could take right now? Operative word now.
okay.
Little things add up to big things.
Yeah.
Because consistency compounds. Little by little, a little becomes a lot.
Yeah. So talk to us about the methods.
I'm going to teach everyone a memory technique that I train Hollywood actors and TED speakers to be able to memorize a speech.
Okay.
If you have to give a toast at a wedding,
Okay.
right? And so what we're going to memorize are 10 keys for a limitless brain.
Okay.
There are 10 levers for a better brain that will
Okay.
make a marked difference in your focus, your memory, your overall brain energy, and health. So
Okay.
I'm going to share them, and then I'll teach you how to memorize these 10 things forwards and
Oh my God, I
backwards.
love this. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is a good brain diet.
Okay.
What you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. A whole area of science we research and talk about in the book called neuronutrition. That your brain is part of your body, but it requires different nutrients, some different nutrients than the rest of your body.
Okay.
Well, actually, let's go with some of my favorite foods. Avocados, the monounsaturated fat, it's good. Blueberries, I like to call them brain berries. Broccoli is good for the brain. Vitamin E. Olive oil, the Mediterranean diet is good for your brain. If your diet allows eggs, the choline in eggs is a precursor to acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter. It's really important for cognitive health. Green leafy vegetables, if you could stomach that, is a kale, spinach. Fatty fishes, because your brain is mostly fat, it's the omega-3s, specifically the DHA. So salmon, sardines is good for your brain. Turmeric. It helps. It has the curcumin, which helps to lower inflammation systemically. Walnuts and almonds, even walnuts look like a brain. High in vitamin E, which is neuroprotective. Probably my favorite is dark chocolate. So everyone can remember that very well. So these are some of my favorite brain foods. Number two, the second key for a limitless brain, killing ants. ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts. Let's talk about number three is exercise. And as your body moves, your brain grooves. As your body moves, your brain grooves.
Okay.
Number four, brain nutrients. You know, if you're not getting the fish, then omega fatty acids, supplementing with DHAs. But then there's all kinds of nootropics like L-theanine, bacopa, rhodiola, creatine, which is often associated with exercise. Huge benefit for mitochondria energy for your brain. Number five, positive peer group. Who you spend time with is who you become. If you spend time with 9 broke people, you're going to be number 10. We have these mirror neurons, and mirror neurons help to drive our empathy and imitate people around us. So we imitate their words. Whether somebody smokes has less to do with their biological networks or their neurological networks, has more to do with their social networks. Because if your friends smoke, you're more likely to take that action. We start modeling the integrity, the moral fabric of the people we spend time with.
Yep.
Of what's acceptable, right?
Yep.
Imitating the habits of the people around us. So you spend time with people who are working out all the time, you're probably more likely to work out. And if you haven't found that person yet, be that person. We could love our family and friends, but they don't have they'd be our peer group.
Right.
That's 5. 6, clean environment. Cleaning your desk or making your bed, but then you feel just kind of a clarity of thought. You know why? Because you're not using mental energy to keep track of everything. Your external world is often a reflection of your internal world. And then number 7, big one, sleep. Hello. Number 8, protect your brain. Brain protection. You know, wear a helmet, protect your brain. It's very resilient,
Okay.
but it's very fragile.
Okay.
Number 9, new learnings. New learnings, meaning there's a study done with nuns on longevity. They lived 80, 90 above. And because it's a set community, similar diet and,
Right.
and day play, they found that half of it was because of their faith and their emotional gratitude. The other half, key factor for longevity, they were lifelong learners. They're reading every day. They're having spirited debates, conversations. And because of it, it added years to their life and life to their years. My favorite learning, reading. Reading is to your mind what exercise your body. And then finally, number 10, stress management. Chronic stress has been shown to shrink the human brain. It also puts you in fight or flight. You're held hostage in your survival brain. And I'm going to walk you through a 2,500-year-old memory technique that will blow your mind. And I want everyone to do this. And
Okay.
you're able to remember all 10. All right. I want you to imagine you're coming to my office. It's in the suburbs. And you can actually just breathe. And if you can, close your eyes just to help you to focus, if it's safe to do so as you're listening. And there are trees everywhere around it's a glass building. Let's say you're coming to take a speed reading class with us. I'm going to name 10 places along this journey to get to that classroom. And what we're going to do is take the 10 keys for a limitless brain, and we're going to imagine each of those keys in each of those places
Okay.
in order. So I'm going to ask everyone to say out loud as you're listening to this. The first place that you get out of is the parking lot. So what's the first place? Say it out loud.
Parking lot.
Parking lot, and that's their verbal memory. I want you to see it, and then we're gonna feel it and get it in our body. So the parking lot. When you get out of the parking lot, you're gonna be reminded you need a good brain diet. And how you do that? Pretend you're 8 years old and use your imagination. If you can't imagine it, imagine you can imagine it. And imagine there's a big buffet of your favorite brain foods. And so you see the blueberries, the avocados, the dark chocolate.
Okay.
And even if you can't imagine, again, imagine you can imagine it, see it, feel it, taste it. All right. So from there, there's a waterfall. It creates like a moat around the building, and so you have to cross a bridge. So the second place is the bridge. So what's the second place?
Bridge.
Bridge. And that's your verbal memory. You go across the bridge, and you're killing ants. It's to remind you the second tip, quick tip, for a limitless brain, you need to kill automatic negative thoughts. So you're stepping on those ants. It takes more time to say it than actually to see it. And as you're stepping on it, you would never do that, but it's just, you can't forget it. You go into the building, the third place, you get into the elevator. What's the third place?
Elevator.
Elevator, great. And then, third brain tip, exercise. So your personal trainer is there, and whatever your personal exercise is, Pilates, CrossFit, whatever, yoga, you're doing it in the elevator. So see and feel yourself doing that. You get out of the elevator, and the fourth place is the hallway. So what's the fourth place?
Hallway.
Hallway. And these are brain nutrients, all the nootropics, right? So I want you to imagine you're tripping and falling on bottles of ginkgo, of creatine, of curcumin, of lion's mane mushroom,
Okay.
right? And you're just tripping on it. You're like Donkey Kong or Lara Croft. You're jumping over these, maybe make the bottles really big,
Okay.
right? And there are vitamins everywhere. You open the door to my office. Immediately to the left is the fifth place, which is the closet.
The closet.
So what's the fifth place?
Closet.
Closet. And inside, you want to remember your positive peer group. So all of your happy friends are in the closet. They're celebrating, they're cheering, big surprise party, happy friends, positive peer group. Maybe we're doing a mastermind,
Okay.
right? You get out, and it's the sixth place is the receptionist. Receptionist. What's the sixth place?
Receptionist.
And so what the receptionist is doing is the sixth brain tip, which is clean environment. The receptionist is cleaning the environment.
Okay.
Waxing, vacuuming, dusting, everything is clean. Behind the receptionist is the seventh place, which is the fish tank. What's the seventh place?
Fish tank.
Fish tank. Everyone say fish tank. And then the seventh tip, sleep. So imagine Nemo, Dory in their pajamas. And they're in their bunk beds. One of them is snoring, right? And you're sleeping with the fishes. So that's what's going on in the fish. And you just see it, you won't ever forget it. You don't have to repeat it 100 times like old school. You see it once, you can't forget it. All right, we're almost there. You go to the classroom, but the door is locked for the speed reading class. And the classroom door is the eighth place. What's the eighth place?
Classroom door.
Perfect. And there's a helmet on a hook there. So you put the helmet on and you headbutt the door open, it splinters everywhere, right?
Okay.
But the helmet reminds you of the brain tip, brain protection. Protect your brain. Great. And we're almost done. In the front of the room is the ninth place, and it's a whiteboard with markers, right? A whiteboard. So what's the ninth place?
Whiteboard.
Great. And I'm there as your instructor, and I'm writing 2 words on the whiteboard in your favorite color. Mel, what's your favorite color?
Red.
Red. In red, I'm writing new learnings. New learnings. So see those 2 words, new learnings, to remind you about, always be learning. And then finally, on the side of this particular classroom are these Japanese plants, these bonsai trees. What's the 10th place?
Bonsai trees.
And you want to remember stress management. So whatever relaxes you, do it on the bonsai trees. Take a moment. You're doing meditation there. You're getting a massage there. You're having your relaxing drink, but you're doing it on the bonsai trees.
Got it.
Perfect. Now you are on stage.
Okay.
And you need to be able to share these 10 things.
Okay.
And you go to the first place is the parking lot, and that reminds you of what, everybody?
Of blueberries and brain food.
Yes, your brain foods. Perfect. And then you cross the bridge, and what are you stepping on?
Ants.
Yes, kill those automatic negative thoughts. You get into the building, you get into the elevator.
Exercise.
Exercise. And then once you get out of the elevator, you see the hallway, and it's covered in
bottles like
all those
ginkgo and
bottles.
stuff that lion's mane and
Yes, the lion's mane,
other
all
stuff.
the brain nutrients. You open up the door to the classroom, and immediately to the left is a closet.
Our friends are in there.
Yeah, all the happy friends, your positive peer group. Then you go to the receptionist, and what's the activity they're doing?
The receptionist is cleaning.
Clean your environment. And behind the receptionist is a fish tank.
And they're sleeping.
What are the fish doing?
They're sleeping, Jim.
They are sleeping.
Oh my God, I could tell you what they are. We're going to put on a helmet and bust through the door, and on the whiteboard is going to be the words new learning. And then there's a bonsai tree where I'm relaxing.
Perfect. And you got it,
Dude.
10 out of 10. And so, and you can even probably do it backwards, Mel. Like if you
Oh,
could probably go
from the bonsai tree relaxing to the new learning to the helmet to the cleaning to the closet where my friends are to the bottles that I tripped over to the
uh,
elevator where there was some exercise to do to the ants that we stepped on to the blue. That is amazing.
yeah. And so my message to everybody is when you understand how your brain works, you could work your brain. When you understand how your memory works, you could work your memory. It starts to change your mindset about what's possible. Because when you do something you never thought you could do, then you say like, what? You get curious, right? What else? Maybe I could read, I really can read 2 or 3 times faster and enjoy it, and get more out of it, or I can learn Spanish.
I want to go into some of the other, I guess, chemicals that you hear associated with the brain and have you explain to us what they are and why they're important for happiness, for brain health. Let's talk about serotonin. What is it and why is it important?
Serotonin is hugely important for many different functions in the brain, but for happiness, for flexibility, and respect. And respect's the ones that fools people. But when your serotonin levels are low, you more easily feel disrespected. And if you have a social fight or you feel diminished in some way, your serotonin levels drop. And when serotonin levels go low, people tend to worry. They get stuck on negative thoughts, negative behaviors. They tend to be argumentative and oppositional. And if things don't go their way, they get upset, which on the surface can appear selfish, but it's really not selfish, it's rigid. And boosting serotonin with like bright light therapy, which is why it's so important to get sunshine. And while, as we go into the holidays, time change happens just at the wrong time, right? As we get less sunlight and it gets colder outside, we just, then got a bomb dropped on us. Like all of a sudden you lose an hour a day of light. And light is so important.
Let me back us up a second. So does your brain create serotonin? Is that what is the function of serotonin in the brain?
So your gut makes about 90% of the serotonin in your body, but it doesn't go directly into your brain. Your brain creates serotonin from the amino acid precursor called tryptophan. And that's why often eating tryptophan-rich foods,
like turkey,
can be helpful, but not in a ketogenic way. You have to eat tryptophan-rich foods with a carbohydrate because you need an insulin response to drive tryptophan into the brain. So turkey and sweet potatoes together is a great combination to boost your mood.
So when you have high levels of serotonin, how does that impact you?
We tend to be happy. You're a little bit less motivated. You sort of don't care that much. I remember when Prozac first came on to the market, and I would give it to some of my depressed patients, and they would say they would be less depressed, but also less motivated. Because as tryptophan goes up, dopamine, another chemical we should talk about, goes down. They have this sort of counterbalancing effect, which is why, and this is really interesting for anyone who grew up in an alcoholic home. I studied children and grandchildren of alcoholics. They often have low levels of both serotonin and dopamine. And so if I just raise one, I make them better in some ways, but worse in other ways. So a lot of people who take SSRIs, they go well, I'm happier, but I don't really care that much. I had one guy tell me he wasn't doing his taxes, and he's like, no, this is going to be a problem. So I had to rebalance his medication.
So is serotonin sort of the happiness one and dopamine is the motivation and drive one? Is that their relationship?
Well, they're both. You think of both of them involved in happiness. And dopamine is the molecule of more. It's when you get dopamine, you go, oh, I like that. And the problem is the more you get, the more you want. And then it turns into trouble. We are wearing out our dopamine centers in the brain in our society with our phones and social media and the nonstop video games and texting. It's we're being thrilled to death, which ultimately wears out the pleasure centers in the brain. So you have to be very careful. I often talk to people about drip dopamine. Don't dump it.
What does that mean? Drip dopamine, don't dump it.
So you want little tiny little tiny bursts of dopamine, not a big splash. So for example, cocaine, big splash of dopamine and you go, whoa. But the problem is you have none left and then you get depressed, which you then start using. Alcohol is the same way. Alcohol dumps dopamine. Nicotine, vaping dumps dopamine. Scary movies dump dopamine. Falling in love dumps dopamine. You want to drip it, holding Tana's hand, getting eye contact, looking for what I call the micro moments of happiness. So much more important. And new love is totally dumping dopamine. So you always, whenever you just fall in love, you need to whoa, this is really awesome. Let me ride this out before I make any big decisions.
So would an example of dripping dopamine include the two micro habits you talked about? One being waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to make it a great day. How am I going to do that? And also at the end of the day, going on that treasure hunt for what went right?
Yes.
Excellent. How can you tell if you have low dopamine?
If you're tired, if you find that you're unmotivated, if you're sad, and you just don't have the motivation to get done what you want to get done. And, I'm in Justin Bieber's docuseries Seasons. And, I've been his doctor for a long time. And they just wore that boy's dopamine centers out. And then, when you become famous like that, you have access to women, to drugs, to video games, and just completely, almost killed that boy. And they deadened his pleasure centers. But the good news is even if you've been bad to your brain, by doing the right things, your brain, we call it neuroplastic, it can be better even in a matter of months.
Wow. We've talked about supplements. We've talked about some micro habits. What are 3 simple ways to increase dopamine?
Cold showers will do it. So I just took a shower before I did it. And I always finished with 2 minutes. I turn it all the way cold because cold therapy has been shown to increase both norepinephrine, another neurotransmitter, and dopamine. Eating tyrosine-rich foods. So we talked about tryptophan, the amino acid building block for serotonin. Tyrosine is the amino acid building block for dopamine. So things like almonds and eggs and beans and fish and chicken, dark chocolate. But you don't want to do that with an insulin response or with a carbohydrate. And so this is where a higher protein, lower carbohydrate diet can be helpful. Exercise also does it, and certain supplements like tyrosine. So tyrosine is a supplement, and it's the amino acid building block for dopamine.
So is there any like certain times of day where your dopamine is higher or lower just naturally?
In the morning,
And is the same true with serotonin?
in the evening.
Okay. So to explain that to us and then how we can use something natural to boost it.
So everybody's circadian rhythm or the
Mhm.
rhythm of their energy is different. There are morning larks and night owls, and you sort of have to know what you are. A lot of my ADD patients are night owls, and society is sort of biased against them. Because school starts early, work starts early for a lot of people. But you just have to know your rhythm. And if your dopamine is high in the morning, that's when you want to focus and get work done. If it tends to be higher later in the day, know your rhythm. Serotonin often helps people sleep. And in our supplement, Put Me to Sleep, we actually have 5-HTP, which is the amino acid precursor, even closer to serotonin than tryptophan. And for a lot of people, it helps decrease worry and promote sleep.
Wow. I'm like slightly overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start in terms of like how to boost my serotonin naturally, how to boost my dopamine naturally. So is there a way to simplify this? Like, you just kind of talked about your circadian rhythm and understanding if you're a night owl or you're a morning person. So if you're a morning person and you kind of wake up and you're naturally more motivated, are there certain things you should do first thing in the morning to keep your dopamine levels high, to stay focused, to promote your brain health?
So one thing I really like, especially as we start into later fall and winter, is morning bright light.
Okay.
And so people who have seasonal affective disorder, so winter blues, that morning bright light therapy, and you can actually get these therapy lamps. I make one called our Bright Minds therapy lamp, 10,000 lux. So it's bright.
Okay.
Put it, don't look at it, put it like an arm's length away from you while you're putting on your makeup or having breakfast, if you have breakfast, for 20 or 30 minutes in the morning. Super simple, can significantly improve dopamine, your energy, mood, and cognitive function. Exercise, whether you want to increase serotonin or dopamine, it does both. Walk like you're late for 45 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. Super simple, bright light, exercise, just incredibly helpful. And this is very important. I just turned 68 this year. And it's very clear to me that the stronger you are as you age, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. But it's really, for older people, it's frailty that kills them almost more than anything else. So light, exercise, simple supplements, and now you can eat in certain ways to boost the neurotransmitters in your brain.
So when you say frailty and strength, are you also recommending, in addition to the 30 to 40 minutes of walking as if you're late 3 or 4 times a week, that you also add in strength training?
You bet. I think it's absolutely critical for men and for women. Your muscles are your protein reserve. So one of my young doctors went to Hawaii on vacation and got this terrible infection that almost killed him.
Oh,
And
wow.
the reason he didn't die is he was strong when he went into that illness and had the protein reserve muscle on his body. And yeah, no, I remember the day when in the hospital, I expected I was going to get a call. He died in the middle of the night because he just got this wicked infection from jumping into a natural pool in Hawaii. But he survived, and he's done great because it's the protein reserve or the brain reserve you bring into an illness or an accident that determines how you're going to do after it. I mean, you probably, seen, one person gets into a car accident and they come out of it just fine. Another one's permanently damaged. Same accident. Why? Because it's the level of brain health or brain reserve they brought into the accident that often determines the outcome. So every single day of your life, from my perspective, every single day of your life, you should be boosting your brain reserve.
What can we do to improve our memory, Dr. Amen?
Well, improve your brain. It's like the most important thing. It's 50%. I mean, think about this, Mel. 50% of people 85 and older will be diagnosed with dementia. Like those are odds I am not okay with. And if you want to keep your brain healthy or rescue it, you have to prevent or treat the 11 major risk factors that steal your mind. And I know we don't have time to go in it, but the mnemonic I have is bright mind. So for example, maybe the most important thing, B, is for blood flow. Whatever you can do to increase blood flow to your brain, you're going to be happier, your memory is going to be better, and you're going to be more sexual. Because whatever is good for your brain, good for your heart, is good for your genitals.
So is that the brisk walking?
So you want to avoid things that steal blood flow, caffeine, nicotine, being sedentary, having any form of heart disease. And then you want to do things that enhance blood flow. So walking, raw cacao, beets, the supplement ginkgo. These things all increase blood flow. Cinnamon, oregano.
Wow. Okay. I want to hear the R though. Bright mind. I know that there's 11, but give me 2 or 3 of them.
The R is retirement and aging. When you stop learning, your brain starts dying. So constantly engage in new learning. The I is inflammation. But the one maybe to talk about more is the T. It's toxins. And we live in a toxic society, right? Here I am in Florida. I just talked about all the fish off the coast in Florida. On average, they have 7 pharmaceuticals in their tissues. But just the products you put on your body. I have all of my patients download the app Think Dirty. It allows you to scan all of your personal products, and it'll tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 how quickly they're killing you.
Oh my God.
We saw this year that the FDA took off a number of sunscreens off the market because they were associated with cancer. How horrifying is that, right? You're thinking you're protecting yourself from cancer. The toxic products are giving you cancer. So think dirty, but also we have to stop thinking of alcohol as a health food. It's not, it's toxic to your brain. Or marijuana is innocuous. It's not, it damages your brain. And, it's these little lies in our society that is really promoting the disease we are just flooded with.
So you've been a psychiatrist for 40 years. What are 5 things you'd never do because it's bad for your mental health and your brain health?
Well, I never believe every stupid thing I think. And I think that's really important to know, I'm going to get these crazy, stupid, awful thoughts, and I know how to manage and dismiss them. I would never say everything I think. Some people come to me and say, oh, Dr. Amen, I'm brutally honest. And I'm like, well, that's usually not helpful. Relationships require not. I would never purposefully stay up late and screw up my sleep. I would never eat everything I want. And I would never take medicine just based on symptom clusters. Like, I'm depressed, so take an antidepressant. So I think that's all insane. I always want to look at the brain and then target whatever treatment I need to how somebody's brain's functioning.
Yeah, the one thing I forgot to ask you, because, right now, as you and I are talking, we've just turned the clocks back. But this time of year, when it gets darker earlier and it's colder, I notice like my mood drops and I feel like sad. What do you do, whether it's because of the time of year or because of chronic stress? You feel this sort of languishing or heaviness set in. What are 3 things that you would recommend that somebody do to boost their mood?
So morning bright light, I think that can be really helpful. So, a bright light therapy lamp for 20 or 30 minutes in the morning, exercise, don't overdo the caffeine. And it's really important, we haven't talked about this yet, turn off blue light when the sun goes down. So
what is blue light?
Constantly flooded with blue light. And in the morning, it's fine, but after dark, it's not, because it decreases the production of melatonin. So you get it from your laptop, or you get it from your phone, or you get it from whatever gadgets you might be looking at. And so after dark, either put blue light blockers on your gadgets or just turn them off and go read a book.
Okay, great. And I also didn't ask you this. How do you know if your dopamine levels are low?
If you're tired, if you're unmotivated, if you can't concentrate, and you find yourself more impulsive than is good for you.
And finally, let's bottom line, because you are the master at elite brain training. If you could leave everyone with just one thing that you would like them to start doing today to create better brain health, what would it be?
It's that mother tiny habit. It's whenever you come to a decision point in your day, just ask yourself, am what I'm doing good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information and love, I mean, I'm serious about this, love of yourself, love of your family, love of the reason you're on earth, you're going to start making good decisions for your brain, and then everything in your life will be better.
Your book has also dug into what I think is jaw-dropping science about a simple walk. So before we kind of dig into all of it, can you talk a little bit about that 2018 study that tracked participants' activity levels and personality traits over 20 years and how walking had impacted people over time?
One is one that looked at inactivity over time. And this was a US study, a so-called panel study tracking changes in personality and correlating those with activity or inactivity. And the bottom line is very, very simple, that people who spend increasing periods of time being sedentary as they move along in life, it's not a question of getting older. This can be a midlife, they tend to show changes in their personality, which are, for want of a better phrase, tending them towards being more asocial, being less open to experience, and probably experiencing more by way of negative emotion compared to people who get up and get out and get moving. The other study that I'm thinking of is one that was conducted just a couple of years ago in older people, people in their late 60s and early 70s. And that study, again, a beautiful US study conducted in the Chicago area, showed very clearly that if you are inactive, there are negative changes in the brain compared to people who are active. And the changes that are positive in the brain from activity arise from getting up and moving and getting out and going for a good walk. So the intervention is a very simple intervention. It's to go for a walk 3 times a week for a couple of miles, along with a walking partner and a physiotherapist. And what you see in the group that are active is brain changes that are really remarkable. You get an increase in the volume of certain brain regions that are concerned with memory, and you also get changes in the effectiveness, for want of a better phrase, of the memory that's supported by those brain regions. Whereas the people who are sitting at home, not active, they're showing a greater decline than they need to do, or than if they had been active over that period of time. So the key point here to really drag out is that being active positively supports good things about your personality, but it also reaches across to cognitive function. It supports positive things about memory function, and it helps you resist the trajectory of decline that you would have if you just are sitting on your couch doing the Homer Simpson, eating a bag of potato chips and watching telly.
I think that most of us underestimate what's actually happening in our bodies and in our minds when we're walking. And so let's break it down. What happens in the brain when you go for a walk?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to think about here, and it really depends on the level of analysis that you want to start at. So let's make it kind of very simple. So I'm sitting here at home and I want to go to the shop. So the first thing that you have to do is form the intention that you're going to go and get up and do something.
Yes.
That could be because somebody's bleeped you or phoned you or whatever to say to come and meet them at the shop, or you realize you need to go and pick up a pint of milk or whatever it happens to be. So what does that do? Well, the first thing is you have to stand up, you have to get up, you have to engage in preparatory movement in order to walk. That's a challenge for your brain. Sitting or lying down in a chair or being recumbent in a chair is not a challenge. Standing up, maintaining balance, and then having directed coherent motion in the direction that you want to go is also a challenge to your brain. So the key point here is that movement, and the movement in this case we're talking about, of course, is walking, acts as a positive spur to the brain, and rhythms that would be quiescent in the brain are suddenly alive. They become very apparent. So in order to get to the shop, you have to orient your body in the correct direction. You have to create a cognitive map of the environment that you're in. These are all subtle, small challenges, but the brain benefits from these. And then let's say you are actually going to the shop and it happens to be up a hill, for the sake of this point. Well, then there are other challenges happening as well. So you have to calibrate your walking speed so that you're at a speed that's comfortable for you. That means you have to step up your heart rate a little. You have to increase your breathing a little. Your musculature has to respond to all of those things. So you've got a whole load of top-down signals from the brain acting as a challenge to the body to get it moving. And then you get to the shop, you do what you got to do, and then you walk home again. You might have to carry something. So that's actually a good challenge for you as well. So, even at those kinds of simple levels, you can see changes across a whole range of things from, as I said, from the kind of top-down commands that are coming from the brain all the way down to your foot hitting the ground and you levering yourself off and moving off.
Well, I certainly don't think about any of those things when
Or should you?
need to get. Well, but what is that? You said that the act of pushing yourself off the couch, standing up, triggering your mind to activate from the top down the mechanical patterns that allow you to walk, the cognitive patterns of surveying where you are and how you're going to get to a certain place, that all these things benefit the brain. How do they benefit the brain?
They benefit the brain because probably the best way to think about this is that movement is medicine, is the lovely phrase that's going around at the moment. So think of an example. Let's imagine you own a bicycle, and you get this lovely new bike from the shop, and you put it in your garage, and you leave it there for a year, and you don't do anything with it. What condition is it going to be in? The chain is going to be all silted up. The tires have probably deflated. The brakes aren't going to be especially responsive. All of those kinds of things will have gone wrong with it. And the same is true for your body. Your body needs to work optimally, repeated challenge. Your brain needs this as well. This is why when for example, if you're walking for the sake of your heart, you need to step it up so that speaking is hard for you, so that there's a sufficient challenge being presented to you. Your body is obviously designed to do two things. One is to conserve energy, but the other is to source energy. And we always have this fight going on within us. Am I going to get up? If I'm going to get up, am I going to take the car? Or, those kinds of choices we make. And they make sense, when you think about the conditions that humans lived under for thousands of years. We didn't have the easy availability of calories that we have now. We didn't have chairs with backs. We sat on tree stumps. We sat down on our hunkers, but we didn't have all of these wonderful comforts that our big brains have allowed us to invent over the past 100 years and to spread around among us all. Even this, fantastic conversation we're able to have. When I said, you don't need to be thinking about these things, this is the joy and the wonder of the body that we have. You don't need to be thinking, well, I have to maintain a certain line of balance. I have to invoke my cognitive map. I have to put one foot in front of the other. All of these things are done at a level below consciousness, and you should only be thinking about them if something goes wrong. Like, for example, you slip because there's a patch of ice, or the shop is closed and you have to think about another shop you have to go to. And I kind of, one of the points that I make repeatedly in the book is that we've designed movement out of our environment. And again, this is perfectly understandable. We're trying to conserve energy. But if we want to get people moving again, what we really need to do is design the environment so that it's easy for people to walk. I give you a simple example. My local suburban town, which I live very close to, had quite narrow footpaths. It's a very old town. It's there since the 1100s or something, and the footpaths are all kind of 3 foot wide. And priority was given foolishly to traffic, even though it's an old medieval town. The pandemic came and people were eating outside. That meant the traffic had to lose its position of primacy. The restaurants were allowed to put tables outside. That meant the footpaths had to be expanded. And suddenly the default is people are walking rather than driving. And that's a really, really nice thing. But to give you a contrary example, in my office, in the building I work in, if you want to come and visit me in my office, you come in the door and I'm up on the 3rd floor. How do you get to me? If you want to walk to me, you have to walk through 4 fire doors to get to the stairs. But if you want to take the lift, or the elevator as you call it, it's just there. So my building has a walking designed out of it. And that building will be, I guess, there for 100 years. So people will be not using the stairs in that building for 100 years. And this is an issue that, generally we've created environments where the default is to conserve energy and not move. But we've got a food surplus, a caloric surplus. So actually what we should be doing is creating environments that make it easy for people to move around under their own steam.
One of my missions in wanting to talk to you is to have the person listening to us right now have an epiphany about the profound power and impact that incorporating a simple walk into your daily routine can have on you. And I know it wasn't until we started digging into your research that I honestly had no idea that a simple walk could have the chemical and structural and creative impact. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.